There's the thousands of people who are watching this on the internet. So if I'm Councillor Ted Cassidy, I'm Chair.
Good evening, Councillor Yasmin Surtees, Vice Chair. Hello, I'm Councillor Sue Waddington, Chair of Economic Development, Transport and Climate Emergency Scrutiny Commission.
I'm Councillor Bhupendavi. I've got nothing to declare.
Councillor Deepak George, nothing to declare.
Good evening. Councillor Nigel Porter, Councillor for Ayleston, Leader of the Lib Dems, and nothing to declare at this moment.
Thank you, Chris.
Good evening, Chair. It's Chris Bergin, Director of Housing.
Kirsty Cowell, Head of Financial Strategy. Amy Oliver, Director of Finance.
Peter Sophie, City Map.
Nina Ashwali, Youth Representative. Arthur Ashwali, Youth Representative.
Julian Young, Governance Support Assistant.
Francis Connolly, Governance Services Manager.
Thank you. Is there anybody on team?
Not at the moment, but maybe later on.
Special welcome to Dina and Al-Taj. Really good to have the young people's voice at these meetings. And welcome to Julian, who's a new member of Francis's large staff group. So, if the emergency alarm sounds, we must evacuate the building immediately by the nearest available fire exit and proceed to the area outside the Ramada Encore Hotel on Charles Street as directed by Democratic Services staff. Further instructions will then be given. Have we got any other officers that might be attending this? No?
No,
we're all here. Yeah. Just make it clear that the rules state that we shouldn't be taking photographs or films of these meetings without permission of the Chair. Okay. Thank you.
Chair, can I just raise a point of order on that? Because I did check out government legislation about this because a member of the public had told me they'd been stopped from filming at the full council meeting. And it's clearly in government legislation that there is no restriction on filming at public meetings or taking photographs.
Well, we'll just have to get some advice.
And for your information, it's on the webcast, so it's already out in the public domain. So I think you need to withdraw that.
No, I'm talking about members. It's very clear in the rules that members... and can I ask Francis to read out the relevant piece?
No, I'm talking about statutory legislation which overrides any council policy. It's the law of the land, Ted. You can't have a council policy which undermines the law of the land. For example, you couldn't have a council policy that said it was okay to go drinking and driving. The law of the land is the law of the land. That's it. Simple as that.
Well, I'm not a solicitor or a legal expert, but we will get some advice on that.
You don't need to be a legal expert.
You're not a legal expert neither. So we will get some advice on it, okay?
I said you don't need to be.
See how this meeting's going to go if you're starting like that.
Well, I think it's important that the meeting goes along following the law of the land. If you want to do something different, then you need to do it outside the meeting.
I said we would get some advice on it and report back on it. Thank you. Okay, we will now move to apologies for absence.
No apologies for absence. Councillor Doward has apologised for lateness. He should be joining the meeting shortly.
Okay, declarations of interest? No, none. No chair's announcements particularly. Minutes of the previous meeting. We've had two meetings, 14th of December. Can we agree those as a correct record? Councillor Porter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hopefully this won't be as contentious as my last comment. But regarding the minutes, I don't know if you remember, but I'm not sure which meeting it was at, but I did mention that obviously the City Mayor's gone out and said on a number of occasions, and I think it's actually reported in the minutes, that the Council's had 50% spending cuts since 2010. And if you remember, I don't know which meeting it was at, either the last one or the one before, but I did highlight and actually use proper figures and data that in real terms last year, 23-24, Leicester City Council in real terms had £10 million more than they did at the time that Sir Peter came into power.
So is that a correction of the minutes or an omission?
Yeah,
from the
it's
minutes?
an omission from the minutes because it's an incredibly important point which seems to get missed. And I did say if anybody wished to challenge me, they could do so. And as far as I'm aware, nobody's challenged the figures that I presented.
Okay, we will
Okay.
look
And
back
there's also importantly...
let me answer that one.
Yeah.
We will ask the officers to look back at that meeting,
Okay.
and if it should be added to the minutes, then we'll do that.
Okay. And the second point, I'm clear about which meeting this was at, which was on the last meeting which we had on the 11th of January,
Yeah.
if you remember that meeting, right. Towards the end of the meeting, I don't know if you remember, but I did ask a question about receiving a copy of the legal advice that the Council had received. Both you and the senior officer refused that information. The City Mayor basically refused it as well, and what he said was that I needed to clarify with the monitoring officer why the legal advice couldn't be made public. Now, I wasn't asking for the legal advice to be made public. What I was asking for was a copy of it. I've since checked the legislation under the Localism Act, and I think it's under Section 17, and it says additional rights to documents and information for members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and this is in the Localism Act. It says where a member of an Overview and Scrutiny Committee requests a document, the Executive must provide that document as soon as reasonably practicable, and in the case no later than 10 days after the Executive received the request. Now, I made my request on the 11th of January at this meeting. I then backed it up again with an email to Sir Peter on the 12th of January. Now, my reckoning, that was 27 days ago. The legislation clearly states that it should be provided within 10 days after the request. So to date, I still haven't had a copy of that information. And I want a copy of the information. And it says within the Localism Act that I'm entitled to receive a copy of it. Not just to go and view it in the council office, but to have a copy. So I'm just making it clear to you. You know how important scrutiny is. So I think we should do scrutiny properly. And when a councillor makes a request for information, it should be provided.
City Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. At the end of that meeting, Councillor Porter asked at least have access to the legal advice the Council received.
And copy, Peter.
I don't, it really doesn't matter whether you ask for a copy or you ask to have access. Well, all right, okay.
Councillor Porter, can you behave
Chair,
You're giving a very bad example to these young people.
Chair.
Can you not shout, please? You can ask that politely as well, because that's a bad example that you're setting up. Young children
Chair.
by shouting and screaming, Chair. So I'll just.
Well, if Councillor.
If Councillor Porter can't hear what I'm saying, I have to speak a bit louder. Okay, what I said was that you're giving a very bad example to the young people how to behave in a meeting. That's all I'm saying. City Mayor.
Yes, sir. What I said at that meeting, and what I've said several times now in emails to Councillor Porter, is that I am not responsible for giving legal advice to the Council. That members of the Council have, as I understand it, access to Council documents, legal advice and other Council documents, that are relevant to their decision-making. And I think this would almost certainly, well, must certainly, amount to such. But it is a matter for the councillors themselves to make their approach to the appropriate officer, particularly in the case of legal advice, to the appropriate legal officer. And as I understand it, and I've only just, in the last couple of days, just had this confirmed from the city barrister, he did actually offer access to that legal advice to Councillor Porter and I think to Councillor Kittredge in an email that he sent on the 16th of January. I don't think any difficulty about Councillor Porter and other members having access to it. Frankly, they just need to go along and ask.
Chair, if I may come back in, because Sir Peter's, again, not dealing with the issue. What I've asked for, and I'll repeat it again, maybe you can get it down. I want a copy of it, which I'm entitled to. I'm not asking him to give me legal advice. It wouldn't be appropriate for him to give me legal advice. What I'm asking for is a copy of the legal advice which the Council has received. And as I say, under the Localism Act, you, me and everybody else here is entitled to a copy of that document or those documents. That's the simple way. Not that we have to go in one at a time and view it in the monitoring officer's office at a time that suits him. We are entitled to have a copy, and for the reasons of scrutiny, that's why it's written within the legislation. So we can keep going round the houses, but I made a request to Sir Peter, who is the executive, for requesting a copy. It is his responsibility to provide me with a copy. You can check the Localism Act, Francis, it's section 17.
Point, thank you. City Mayor.
Just very briefly, I mean, obviously, when we get Council's opinion on something, the instructions to Council come from the City Barrister. The advice goes to the City Barrister, who happens also to be our monitoring officer. And there is no difficulty whatsoever in, as I understand it, members asserting their right to have access to that. But they need to do it to the appropriate officer, not to me. I am not the keeper of the Council's legal advice. The City Barrister is, and frankly, Councillor Porter just needs to stir himself, contact the City Barrister and get along there and have a look at it.
Thank you very much.
Chair, and finally on the minutes, I've got one other item which is
the
meeting. Yeah, at the very end of the meeting, you might remember when we were talking about the proposal to spend £45 million buying houses, I pointed out about energy performance certificates, and I think gave information about a particular family who was struggling to heat their home. Unfortunately, since that last meeting, this family, well, it was actually on Tuesday, which is a family made up of 2 adults and 4 children, have been evicted by the council from their home. And what concerns me is at a time when the council's under huge financial pressures, for a debt of around, I think, less than £4,000, this family, with children under the age of 12, have been evicted from their homes. Those 4 children are probably going to end up in care now, which will cost the council probably £4,000 per week. So I just think, can we have a bit of joined-up thinking in Leicester City Council, where we don't take actions like that, which result in this family getting split up and children ending up in care?
First point is that the minutes aren't verbatim reports of meetings. They're summaries, if you like. So you sometimes want something that you've said reported, but it isn't. That's all members get that. All I can do is ask you to write to the Director of Housing about this and get a formal response. Chris, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, the Council has already had a formal response on the matter and has been briefed on the actual case in question. And like you say, it is a sad case, but I think we have to remember that as a council, we have over 19,000 council homes, and each year we undertake 5 or less evictions and they all come about because of the refusal of those individuals or families to actually engage with the income management team. And not to go into the details, but sadly on this occasion, that's exactly the scenario we've had. And to reference in relation to the £4,000 debt, if all of our 19,000 tenants owed £4,000 to us, that would equate to a grand sum of £76 million of rent being owed.
Can I just get clarification about what's going to happen to the children? Will they end up going into care? From the head of housing?
I would ask you to seek answers in writing from the Director of Housing.
Thank you very much. I've done that, and I haven't had a response to that specific question. I've asked it 3 times now, over the last 2 weeks.
I don't
So I'd
think
like an answer. Can we have an answer here tonight, please?
the point has been made in this meeting that you haven't had a response, and we'll ask whether that can be dealt with. I don't think it's appropriate in this meeting to discuss individual cases. Although you're talking anonymously, it may be that other people
No,
know.
but these are children.
You need to get an answer to that, but it's not the appropriate forum for that. I'm just giving you advice. It's not appropriate for you to be discussing.
We're all human beings. I think you need to show.
You can't have a discussion if you're talking over someone who's trying to answer you. It's not appropriate to discuss individual cases in this meeting. Full stop. So you made the point that you haven't had a response. We will just say that's been noted in this meeting and ask you to get your response.
Can I just comment?
Councillor Waddington.
Are you approving the minutes at the moment? There's a couple of a couple of points. Just to give you notice, a couple of points I want to raise on the minutes of the meeting on the 11th of January. I'm not disputing the minutes. I'm just saying there are a couple of points I want to raise. I wasn't quite sure because Nigel was obviously raising them and some issues. So I wasn't quite sure of how you were dealing with these. So do you want me to raise them now? Yes, yeah, okay. Well, the first one's pretty simple. It's on page 11. Reference was made by members to several new play area improvement projects that were being developed in their wards. Now, my recollection was, on that point, that we were told by Sean Attenbury that there was, in fact, money in the account, in the budget, for play equipment in certain parts of the city, which he listed, and he said he would be contacting the relevant ward councillors in the near future to discuss it, because you might recall this came about as a result of a discussion of a call-in where the person who put the call in said better spend the money on play equipment, etc., rather than what we proposed. And Sean Attenbury explained that there was money for both. There was money for the play equipment as well as the main project. So I'm raising it because I have not yet heard. One of the wards identified is something I've been waiting for many years. I've not yet been contacted by Sean Attenbury to discuss that, and that was a commitment he gave. So could that be recorded? That's a simple point.
Remind us who you meant, the City Mayor, was
No, it was Sean Attenbury.
Oh, Sean Attenbury.
Yeah. Okay. So the second point I want to raise on those minutes was we agreed by vote that we were going to have a special council meeting and we were going to recommend the purchase of housing to meet and the leasing of housing to help meet the homelessness crisis. So by majority vote that was agreed by this committee. Subsequently, of course, the special council meeting didn't take place. And I cannot see any reference to the acquisition or leasing of the housing in the budget that we have been presented with. It will be discussed later on this evening. So can we please ask the City Mayor what... I mean, the need is still there. The need for these housing, in my opinion, is still there. It is. Yes, it was about the whole meeting, you know. So what I'm trying to find out is what is going to happen now. I'm sure he knows all about it. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting a little bit lost because people are raising questions about the minutes. But you're saying what actually happened.
Yeah, Chair. Officers are looking at some of the implication of different ways of doing it, because a number of other authorities have done similar things, but with a slightly different twist on it. Having done that, they are also, though, preparing to get on with it as quickly as possible, so that they're gearing up, as it were, to do it. So it shouldn't be delayed it actually happening. But the actual approval of how we do it is possibly coming to the council's budget meeting, but I think it's probably too late to sort of, as it were, insert it into the report. So it'll probably be coming to the March council meeting. So the actual work shouldn't be at all delayed, but the mechanism by which we do it is being checked out.
That's fine. So if I understand it correctly, the proposal may be revised, the ways of doing it may be revised, but the actual intention of acquiring these extra properties to meet some of the homelessness crisis will be brought forward in March. Yeah?
Very succinctly summarised. Yes. Better than I did.
Thank you. Councillor Porter?
Yeah. Sorry to go on, but I think it's another important thing. This is again from the minutes. I'm not sure which meeting it was at, but if you remember, we had information about the Lothbury Property Fund. Do you remember? £3.3 million investments. People are nodding their heads. Yeah. I think we've had some updated information, and it's basically, I think it could be considered that it might not be actually completely accurate, because it says that over the 5 years or so, the council's got a return of about £500,000 or so. But once you take into account costs, obviously, it's maybe that figure isn't quite as positive as it sounds. But having said that, the other thing that does concern me is, and I had raised this, is when the council went into this fund, what you do is you have to basically buy a share in the fund. And at the time you buy a share, the people or the company or the broker, whoever you buy it from, does what's called a spread, which is a difference between the buy and the sell price. Now, I've looked over Lothbury over the last, 5 years or so, and the spread on that tends to be around about 7%. So in reality, the council, if it pulls out of this fund, but in reality, they've already lost 7% of the £3.3 million by going into it. Now, that doesn't appear to have been accounted for. Now, that's quite a large amount of money. So it's, not provided within the information. Now, I haven't got everything to hand at the moment, so I'm just going from memory. But my concern is that the council doesn't appear to be aware that they actually have to pay a spread in order to go into it, buying it into the fund.
Chair, with respect, I mean, those may be very legitimate questions, but it's a really odd way to bring them up. I mean, I'm not even sure what minutes Councillor Porter is referring to, or whether there is a minute to which he's referring.
This is the thing, it hasn't even been limited. The council's going to lose about
Chair, this is a bit like taking any other business at the beginning of a meeting.
Have you got a
reference to the minutes so we can get a hold of what we're talking about, please?
Well, you would have thought it would be mentioned in the minutes, because it's about the council. The fund is basically has closed. Francis has found it.
It is in the minutes. Yeah, it's page 7 of the document pack. It was the item 61, so it starts on page 6, and it's the mid-year review of Treasury management activities, and there was an action in there to provide some further detail following the points that was raised, and that detail has been shared recently.
Okay. Councillor Darby.
No, sorry, the point I was making was...
You're not Councillor Darby. Councillor Darby.
Mine is a very simple request. I sent in the apologies for the meeting of 11th January. So can you correct the minutes, please?
Yes, I wanted to address the committee those. In the copy of the minutes which have been published, there's an error. There's 2 errors in there, actually. They've since been republished. They're not reflected in the paper copy, and that relates to apologies received from Councillors Darby, Surtee and Joel, which were all received and have been reflected and updated on the online system, but weren't in the original paper copy that you've seen. Similarly, Councillor Whittle, who was attending as a substitute member that evening, he voted in favour of a motion in relation to both core items. That was his vote was the vote was recorded, but his name was missed out in error, and again that has been corrected as well. So just to confirm that those fairly minor adjustments have been made to the minutes.
Thank you for raising that. Yeah. Okay, with any amendments that we might need, can we approve the minutes, please? Thank you. Questions, representations and statements of case, none have been received. Petitions, none have been received. Tracking of petitions, monitoring report, page 19 of the paperback pack. None marked as read. There are 4 included in the report are currently complete. I don't know which 4 they are.
We just made that.
Yeah. We're noting that. Okay. Questions for the City Mayor? None received. Okay. Right, we move to the revenue budget, which starts at page 25 of the document pack. This report details the City Mayor's proposed budget for 24-25 and also describes the future financial outlook. And this goes before the Council on the 21st of February, where decisions will be made. So the budget has been scrutinised by the various commissions, and we've got notes of what their views were. So we've had extracts from Culture and Neighbourhoods, Economic Development, Transport and Climate Emergency, and the Public Health and Health Inequality Scrutiny Commission in part of the second dispatch of paperwork now. They're in front. I think you've got copies in front. Yes. But over to the City Mayor to present this.
Thank you, Chair. As members will be, I think, very well aware, certainly long-standing members, but newer members will have obviously read of it in the local media, or listened to it on Radio Leicester. It's been an incredibly challenging period over the last 10, 12 years. We've had to make very substantial reductions in the services that the Council provides, at the same time as having to face very dramatic increases in the costs of adults and children's social care. The reductions that we've had to make in everything else have been over 50% in terms of spending, and frankly, you don't save over 50% of your spending by buying fewer paper clips. It really does cut into things that matter not just to us, but much more importantly, matter to the people of the city. We've, I think, managed it remarkably well. Certainly, we haven't gone over the Section 114 cliff in the way that Birmingham, Nottingham, and a number of other places have, but we can see that cliff edge approaching. What we have in front of us is a budget that does balance for the year ahead. It's been, as you said, considered by scrutiny, and all have generally accepted that it is a reasonable and realistic budget. But, and it is a big but, that cliff edge that we're using our reserves very heavily this year to postpone going over the edge is looming. And we are, during this year, going to have to face some very, very difficult decisions as to how we can enable the Council and its services to avoid the fate of Birmingham and Nottingham and others. There are going to be some difficult decisions which will be considered by scrutiny and no doubt debated long and hard in the chamber. But it's been a difficult decade or more. It's going to be a particularly difficult year in front of us. Chair, I don't know whether there's really very much more I can say to that, because obviously, members, I think, are well aware of the overall situation, have had an opportunity to consider this as scrutiny, and I think, recognise that we have to see things through to the end of this year, this coming financial year, as part of this budget, but must face up to the realities of what is being imposed on us, as it is on so much of local government by the government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, City Mayor. Amy?
I think I would just add to some of the comments the City Mayor has. The financial outlook in this revenue budget is significant. We are getting a balanced budget for 24-25, but there is significant action that needs to be taken to balance the 25-26 budget. We have seen significant growth in adult social care, children's social care, home to school transport and homelessness. I would just note that the budget report that is due to come to Council will actually show a worsened position than what is in here, of £11 million. It's a contribution of factors, a mixture of the national living wage increase that was announced just before Christmas and the position in relation to homelessness and that constant changing position at the moment. The other reason is around government funding that has not kept up with the increasing costs that authorities are facing across the country. And also we would note that Council did announce back in the autumn of 2022 that we were to expect further austerity beyond 25-26. So I will remind councillors that we've had a policy for a number of years of having a managed reserve strategy. This report that is in front of you proposes that we will no longer have enough reserves to continue that strategy, and we'll use it fully up in 24-25's budget. There's been a lot of cases in the press around exceptional financial support that councils have received. We will not be able to get that during 24-25. However, what I would say about exceptional financial support is that is not an easy solution. That government has not given any local authority cash that is exceptional financial support. They've given them extra ability to use capital receipts to balance the budget or abilities to raise council tax. There has been no cash payments to those local authorities. Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Amy. Councillor Porter.
Thank you very much. At the last meeting I attended, which was the Economic Development Scrutiny Committee, where we looked at the budget, we were told, Amy wasn't there, sadly, but we were told that if the council does go over a cliff in 24-25, we would be able to sell some assets. So this something that I've been pushing for a while, and it was basically confirmed by officers that it could take place, would be that if we were to sell assets, one of the assets I think we could consider getting shot of was the Francis Bacon, in the New Walk Museum, because I think previously when it was mentioned, we were told it was worth over £20 million, so it's probably worth a lot more now. And if the council is struggling, maybe that's something we should continue. And certainly a few members of the committee were in favour of selling the Bacon if it meant that the council could stay afloat. But having said that, if I can draw your attention to page 29 of the budget overview that we've got, section 4. I do love to go back over previous budgets because, as Sir Peter's already mentioned, the council's really struggling. We've never had it so bad. So what I did was I went back and looked at his very first budget, which was in 2012-2013, and went through it sort of line by line. So if we start at the top line here, where we've got service budget ceilings, in 2012-2013, that figure was £249.7 million. And as you can see here, we've got a figure of £375 million. So I think we can all agree that the current figure is a lot bigger than the figure that we had in 2012-13. Am I right, or am I missing something here? Maybe Sir Peter could answer the question. Is the figure that we have here on the top line bigger than the figure that we had in 2012-13 of £249.7 million, Sir Peter?
You're talking about how many years difference? 12?
No. You need to add up 12, 13. Yeah, it's 11 years ago. Yeah, so I'm just asking.
Yeah,
okay. Is it a bigger figure?
Simple question.
Yeah. Peter.
Sitting there, can you respond to that question? Or Amy?
I'll readily acknowledge I don't actually have that budget book in front of me, and I don't think you'd expect me to. What I do know is that over the decade, the growth in the need to spend on adult and children's social care has increased dramatically. It's not just for us. It's something that puppeteer authorities across the country report on. And is very significantly greater now than it was back at that time, or indeed in the decades that preceded that. What that, together with the government cuts, has produced is, and this is inescapable, however, but Nigel tries to wrap it up by making reference back to figures that we actually don't have in front of us. What that has meant, and Amy, as our professional officer responsible for this, will bear me out entirely on this. What that has meant is that all of our other services have had to reduce their expenditure by over 50%. That's just an inescapable figure. Now, whatever you do about what's happened to inflation in the meantime, so on, it is in a sense an irrelevance. The fact is that other services have been reduced in terms of their cost by over 50%, and that's been pain for us. But my goodness, it's been a real pain for the people who rely on our services. And you can wrap it up as much as Councillor Porter wishes on what the cash figures are. The fact is, social care gets more expensive every year, and the amount available diminishes every year for everything else.
If I may just come back on that, Chair, because the actual figure is, although Sir Peters probably doesn't believe me, but it's actually over £125 million more we have now than we did have then. Now, when you take into account inflation, so you get a real figure, it means that, including inflation, we actually have £31.8 million more today on this top line figure than we did however many years ago. You said it was 10 or 11 years ago. So in real terms, and this is the important thing, yes, prices have gone up, costs have gone up, but in real terms, we have £31.8 million more. That's the crucial thing.
Okay.
And
Amy, can I respond to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the things I would just note that doing a direct comparison between the budget ceilings nearly 10 years, 8 years ago, and now is difficult because we move departments between budget ceilings, so I can't always do a direct comparison. But what I would note, if you looked at the adults and children's figures between them, there is a significant difference. And actually, social care, the budget ceilings in social care have grown by 100 million in that time. So it's very hard from those budget summaries to do that direct comparison, but I can tell you that social care has grown in cost by 100 million over that period. I hope that answers the question.
One final point, sorry to hog it, was to do with the next line. No criticism here, but I want some clarification, because obviously the figures I've provided have taken into account inflation, so it is a bigger figure we have today in real terms. But we've got corporate budget here of a figure of £25.2 million, which says inflation provisions and contingencies. Now, it's a very woolly description of a £25 million spend, so I'd just like to have a bit more detail what that actually involved, when I've actually pointed out that in real terms we do actually have more money than we did in 2012-13.
Thank you. Amy?
Hi, yeah, it's always been our policy to hold inflation parts as a central corporate part until we know what they're going to be used for the following year, because what we hold them for is mainly pay award, and we don't know what a pay award is until it's agreed by the NGC. It's not agreed by us as a council. So actually that figure is made up of 11.2 million for the 23-24 pay award. So that's the amount above what we budgeted for that the final pay award was for this financial year. Then it's 9 million for a 24-25 pay award, and then there is 5 million in there for energy pressure in 25-26. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you.
So this is, sorry, just to clarify, so what we're doing is we're paying in this year for spending in the next, or setting aside money, as you were saying, for the next 25-26, you said, for energy.
The energy is for 24-25, so if I said the wrong year, I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
Councillor Darwood.
Thank you, Chair.
Hmm?
Which one? Him or me?
You don't.
All right. Okay. No worries. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I've gone through the financial budgets for the last 2 financial years, and thank you, Emmy, for sending me the link. It was really good help. I just wanted to see how the trends were working out. And I just want to make a few comments here. Okay? The first one is on page 31, para 6.10, adult social care. We do accept Council is going through some serious financial issues. Okay? And as responsible opposition, I think we will basically think things through and work in a manner that basically helps the city of Leicester. Okay? That's where we are going to come from. Okay? From what I understand, the main pressure points are on the demand-led budgets, like adult social care, children's, disabled facilities grants. Right? So I think we accept that there are issues around those 3 big departments, and that it's difficult to contain those demands. But having said that, see on the part of 6.10, it's mentioned there very clearly that what officers are trying to do to contain it. For me, what's happening in there is not enough, because, you see, you don't start building wells when water wells if there's a fire somewhere. Okay? This issue has been going on for the last few years. So what's in there in para 6.10 should have been happening for the last 2, 3, 4 years. It's a continuous process. Okay? And one of the ways of looking at it is whether the staff are reviewing the packages on time, especially the high-cost domestic packages, residential care packages. It's a continuing process. And if there's a break in the review process somewhere, then you'll find that the costs are going to spiral because you're not looking at it. Okay? And at one of the committee meetings, at the social care meeting, this did come up, and that the reviews were not done in majority of the cases for 1 year or 2 years. So what we are seeing here is an impact of things not happening in the way they should have happened. Okay? And my request to the officers is that, for goodness sake, let's get handle on these things. But how we manage the care packages, because that's where it starts. Okay? It's a demanded budget, I accept that, we accept that. But there are ways of handling it, and para 6.10 is a step in the right direction. But I think if we want to avoid similar problems next year, and next financial year is going to be even more difficult than this year, then we better start doing something about it now. Okay? So that's my thing about on the demand-led budgets. We simply should not put our hands, look, it's demand-led budget. We should never do that. Okay? There are ways of handling the demands. Okay? And then on page, I'm really surprised here about one thing. On page 47, para 3.1, if you look at how, in terms of how different bands are going to be affected, I was very surprised that most of the properties are under band C, A, B, and C. That means the council has got very low base to start from. And that does impact on the amount of money the council collects. Yeah? So, you see, there are all sorts of things going on around here in terms of understanding the budgets, where the weaknesses are, where the problems are. And unless we know where the problems are, we can't tackle. We can't find a solution. Okay? So this one was a surprise to me, because a lot of other authorities I know, most of the properties are around band D, and then they're higher than band D, E, F, especially the county areas. Yeah? So that's, to me, that was a surprise to me. Now, I don't know what one can do about it. It's there. It's just simply that you can't do much about the properties. But one of the answers is that, obviously, to build more houses. And Councillor Waddington's question around that, about homelessness, building more properties, things like that, will raise the base for the houses, and that may bring in more money. But these are the things we need to look at in a jointed manner. And one thing, I'll just go back to it if you don't mind, Chair. The point Councillor Porter raised about joint-up thinking, I think it's a very, very important point, that if something happens in one department, then one has to think clearly the impact of it on the costs it will have on the other departments. That's one example Councillor Porter gave. But one of the major one is around the children's department, the adult social care, where children under 18, they go or refer to the adult social care. So the cost falls on the adult social care, but the budget that was in the children's services catering for those people doesn't go with the child when in the transition process. So there's an added pressure on adult social care. Now, these are the things that needs to be looked at to make sure that the budgets are managed and controlled properly. Okay? But overall, we understand the situation. We accept that there are a lot of pressures. And as a responsible opposition, we will come up with ideas and views, but for the benefit of the people of Leicester. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, can I thank Councillor Darbo for his very helpful contributions, and obviously for the attitude that he and his colleagues will be adopting to this budget, and indeed some of the very difficult issues we've got ahead of him. I'll leave it to him perhaps to pick up some of the issues. There's two particularly I wanted to pick up. One was he's quite right to draw attention to that table on page 47 about the distribution of the types of properties that we've got in the city. And it is something that means that, Leicester and cities like Leicester, with fairly high levels of deprivation and low property levels, suffer very, very hard when the burden of paying for local services is being transferred in the way that it has been to the local council taxpayers. Because obviously our council tax base is, significantly less broadly based than it is out in the county. I would just say, and I'm really not making a political point about this, the whole reform of the council tax system is long overdue, and no party, my own included, I've actually got to grips with that over a long period of time. And, consequently, the valuations of, I don't know when these were made, Amy may know, but it's a long, long time ago. So it's not something that any party can be proud of. But the fact is, it's stagnated because no party's been prepared to, have the courage to give it the reform that's needed. And, of course, the other thing that's, particularly hit authorities like Leicester, urban authorities like Leicester, is that with the diminution of the grant that was given according to needs and deprivation, obviously where you have more needs and deprivation, you've suffered disproportionately more, and you don't have the council tax base to prop it up. A wealthy, leafy suburb, you're likely to have council tax profile that looks very different from this one. The other point I just wanted to pick up was that Councillor Darby is also quite right to raise the issues of our demand-led budgets, particularly the ones in social care, and and the need for us to continue our efforts, redouble our efforts, to drive them down and to prevent them from continuing to spiral upwards. I would say. That I do believe that very considerable efforts have been made, but you can always do more, and you can always be even more active in trying to review those packages and to drive them down. Except that, of course, and again, I think I'm right in saying, I might not, Amy, that when we review packages, they tend to go up. Because when you look at people's needs, they tend to get greater, with age or or whatever it might be. Perversely, while you want to review those packages in order to try to drive them down, you end up putting them up. But I nonetheless take the point about the need for us to redouble our efforts to do what we can to keep those spiralling social care costs under control.
Just to add a couple of points there, I mean, you're right about the council tax. If we put our council tax up, we don't raise as much as a lot of other authorities would, especially if you compare us to like a London borough. So an extra 1% in council tax increase would only be 1.4 million for us. Still not to be turned down, but it's not a significant amount compared to other authorities. And I think you're right about the cross-working. We have got some boards now where it's got the strategic directors from all the areas, along with myself and the Chief Operating Officer, to try and make sure we have got more of that cross-working, and when decisions are being made, we are working together and making sure that we think of all the consequences in this. Thank you.
Councillor Darwin's next.
Thank you, Chair. I think first of all, I'd say that the work done by the officers is quite commendable, and over the years, and City Mayor in terms of managing a budget that's seen decreases over the years and years, and managing what we don't have. I mean, I wouldn't agree, and we didn't agree to selling the bacon as suggested by Councillor Porter. It's like selling the family silver, Councillor Porter. So I'd like to make that clear. But one thing that came to mind about the budgets, we are where we are, and that there are challenges ahead, and we have to make difficult decisions. But one thing that you'd said was the home-to-school transport has been a major kind of expenditure factor that we need to consider. Now, for me, the logical thing would be to bring it in-house. I think I mentioned it previously, where the considerations can be given to bring it in-house, because at the moment, some of these taxi firms operate in a manner that, in a collective manner, and sometimes I don't want to be dramatic, but cartelian sometimes, in terms of how we have the authority at their mercy. So I was wondering what would be the possibilities of considering bringing it back in-house, this particular service.
Okay, but deal with those, yeah.
The issue of SEN travel is something that authorities across the country are grappling with. It is a very unsatisfactory situation, to put it at its politest, where the amounts that are being paid by us and by other local authorities are very expensive indeed. Some individual children costing a very, very large amount of money. A national initiative needs to be launched to make a fundamental difference to it. That does not mean that there may not be things that we and other local authorities can do as an individual basis for now, which may involve doing some of the provision ourselves. It's got to be sorted, and I would just want to stress that I and my colleagues are very much onto it, but would also suggest it is something that perhaps in the weeks and months ahead the appropriate scrutiny commission may also wish to have a look at and ask some tough questions of us as politicians, of the administration, but also of the providers as to how they can justify some of the prices that they charge. So I think it might be quite a useful exercise, particularly if those questions are asked in public. And some of the providers have to explain in public how they operate and what they charge. With regard to Francis Bacon, I apologise for not having come back to it earlier on. I have to say, on and off over quite a long period of time, I've thought about some of our family silver, as it was described, and whether it could be sold. I'm always assured by officers that very few councils have ever tried it, and those that have regretted it. That actually the penalties for doing it in terms of loss of museum recognition, loss of grant, loss of support from Arts Council England, not just for the museums but for other things in the city, always outweigh any of the benefits that could be achieved from it. Now, if Council Porter or anybody else wants to show me an authority that has tried it and has found that it pays off, I'd be very interested to hear it. But all of the advice I get from officers is that it has such a significant downside that even if you were prepared to sell the family silver, you would find yourself paying a lot more by penalties.
Okay, I've got Councillor Wallace and we've got Alan Sarge. Okay. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, to say it's true that Councillor Porter did express his opinion that the Newark Museum could be sold off at the Economic Development Scrutiny Commission. He received no verbal support from anyone else present, so I can assume that that was an well, it was certainly not the view of anyone. Anyway, I'm not going to argue with you now, Nigel, because I'm talking about the budget. And I want to refer to page 27 of the budget report and the paragraph 2.8. This explains how, faced with the difficult financial situation that the Council is in, during the forthcoming, and indeed, yes, during the forthcoming financial year and even now, a root and branch review is going to take place, and this means a lot of discretionary services will be under threat. Such a review will commence in January. And this is, I think, where we need to be far more transparent about what is actually happening. First of all, I've yet to see a list of discretionary services, and it might be obvious to some, but not to all, exactly which services are seen or are designated as being discretionary. And I know from what has already been said in answer to Councillor Darby that the statutory services like social care are going to be looked at, but would it would be helpful to have a list of the discretionary services, and that the work that is being undertaken be brought to the commissions. In fact, the Economic Development Commission did recommend that the Commission receive reports on the work done by the Executive from January on the 25-26 budget reductions and the areas under review. Since that was agreed by the Economic Development Commission, I received a call for help from the Adventure Playgrounds, because they had apparently been told, now this is their understanding which may be completely wrong, but because I hadn't been informed at this stage, I had no way of correcting their impression. They had been told that their budget was going to cease entirely.
Just hold on a sec.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I'm on an important issue here, Councillor Cassidy. I mean, if you want me to shut up, I will, but, you know.
No, I'm asking you to just hold on one sec, because the two girls are leaving, and I know you wanted to ask a question. Sorry about that. But,
so you ask your question, and I'll. You ask your question.
no, it's okay. Thank you very much.
Right.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah, it's okay. So this is an illustration. If people are coming to me, and already, you know, people are asking what's happening to my bowling club, what's happening to my neighbourhood centre. If these things are under review, and I understand that for some of them, the answer may be not what they want to hear. The answer may be, yes, there are going to be reductions in this area of service. But it would be very helpful if the commissions could be aware, and this commission could be aware of what is under review. And also, those of us who have the inclination, which would include me, could make suggestions for areas that could be looked at where it might be possible to make reductions which are less painful perhaps than some of the ones that have been brought forward. But I don't really feel that we need to be kept in the dark about this. Everyone knows we're in a financial crisis, that local government and Leicester City Council is facing a very difficult year. We need to prepare for it, but I think it needs to be a joint effort. So I would like to see in the recommendations at the end of this discussion that this is part of the process, that scrutiny is involved in the review of those services that are under examination for reduction. Because in the olden days we used to see lists, and then next to each list it told you whether the budget was to increase, decrease, or whatever, stay the same. Now it's done differently, but it doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be transparent about it. Thank you.
That is a proper role for scrutiny. I can just add that years ago, of course, we saw all these lists of things that are going to get better. Growth items, if you remember. City Mayor, the issue that Sue raised.
I mean, the first thing to say is...
openness.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is Sue's entirely right. I mean, there is a need for us to reassure and to make sure that scrutiny is actively involved in the decision-making that's going to be necessary over the months ahead. And, you may wish to, reinforce that at the end of this debate by putting down a motion to that effect, and I think, very appropriate to do so. So no difficulty with that at all. Just a couple of comments. First, with regard to discretionary or statutory, the distinction between the two, it is not nearly as straightforward as you might think it would be. And the example that they always give is libraries. We have a statutory obligation to provide libraries. Councils can meet that statutory obligation to provide libraries by providing a van in a car park on Saturdays. That's a library. With some books in the back of it, of course, just to show that it is available for lending. Now, obviously, you could say that the rest is non-statutory, but you wouldn't want to go to the ludicrous extreme, just parking a van in the car park and claiming it is. So there's not a clear distinction between the two. And obviously, we do need to look at some of the things that are clearly non-statutory and differentiate them from some of the things that are clearly statutory, such as looking after children, and keeping them safe. But also to note that there's quite a lot of things where there is discretion in, between those two extremes, as it were. I would just also just want to comment on adventure playgrounds. I hope that the email that Sarah sent out yesterday, I think it was, as sort of clarified the situation. Adventure playgrounds, I think, were talked to first back in October about the future. And I think there's further discussions going on with them. We're, I think, probably the only local authority now that does actually provide such extensive support for adventure playgrounds, which I'm very proud of the fact that we are. But I think, it's I think it's very much to be commended that they've wanted to talk with them about the future. Because, frankly, what we don't want to do is to fall off a cliff edge like they've done in Birmingham and Nottingham and find that they've lost their funding, with 2 weeks' notice. So, as I understand it, the discussion that's taking place with them is, it's going to be tough ahead. Don't know for certain what is going to be available for you, but it is unlikely that it's going to be the full, whatever it is, £1 million+ in years ahead. And I think that's what's happening at the moment.
Well, I'm happy to get into the detail of that if that's what the City Mayor wants, because I understand the total budget the council currently spends on adventure playgrounds is just under £1 million, 900 and whatever. And they have been told that in the forthcoming financial year, that is 24-25, they will each be asked to take a percentage cut. Well, this is the problem. This is part of the problem, Chair. This information, which comes from people who have supposedly spoken to officers, and members like me know nothing whatsoever about it, makes it difficult. Which is why the reason for my request, I don't really want to discuss the adventure playgrounds in this context. I will fight for them. Because I believe they play a very, very important role in serving the needs of some of the most vulnerable children in the city. And I fought for them before, and I'll do it again. But I don't want to discuss it now. What I want to discuss is the opportunity for us to know what's going on, so that we aren't confronted with these sorts of situations in the future. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
If I can just come back, I mean, I readily acknowledge that point, which is that it is important that members in general and the scrutiny function in particular are fully informed and involved in decision making as we go forward from here. It's going to be difficult, and it is important that we have the opportunity to debate it fully in public and to hear what is being said. Amy's just checked that there is absolutely no reference at all in any of these papers to the adventure playgrounds in the current year getting anything other than the current level of funding. And I don't know, what has been said to them, but that is the case. But it is right that they and others should know that it's going to be tough times ahead, and not be taken by surprise if in subsequent years the current level of funding is not available. That's not to say it won't be, because, as I say, those decisions need to be made and so on. But I think it would be irresponsible, particularly with voluntary groups such as that, for there not to be some frank discussions with them about how they are viewing the future, and get them in some way to be geared up to argue the case for themselves, and also to look to see what else might be available by way of funding.
Just add a comment there. When we get to the council meeting, I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of kids, adults from the adventure playgrounds outside the council town hall asking what's going on. And it's important we know what's being talked about. That's the point I think Sue's making, so that we can handle that. Okay.
Councillor Porter.
Yeah, I'll agree with you both, you and Sue, on that, because people will be saying, what's happening to my services? Why aren't they being provided? And I think they'll be quite justified in saying that. And it's also interesting that Peter's pointed out, the council's statutory obligations to provide particular services. But the question I'd been asking was around, the painting that's in the New Walk Museum. And what I wanted to know was just clarification, really, that if we do go over the edge of the financial cliff due to the Labour Council's mismanagement, would we be able to sell the bacon? And the reason I'm saying that is because we're going to have to justify what we're doing to the people of this city when they, as you've both quite rightly pointed out, they'll be saying, what's happening to our services? And we'll be saying, well, sorry, we've got to cut them, but we've actually got a painting in the museum which hasn't been on display for a long time, rarely on display, probably most people haven't seen it, that's worth over 20 million quid. But we're refusing to sell that, even though we possibly could sell it. This is what I want clarification on. But at the same time, the council's able to sell off buildings. There doesn't seem to be an issue there. I mean, why do we have to be so precious about a piece of art, which nobody particularly likes, but we can get rid of a lot of, buildings? I mean, what about all those buildings around Leicester Castle, which was sold off on the cheap before the election? One of those was a 2-3-bed terraced house. It went for £149,000. Okay. Absolutely a bargain. This is the thing. The council. The question is Labour mismanagement resulting in people not getting services, and you can argue all you want about government cuts, but at the end of the day, it's down to Sir Peter and his group how the money's spent. So I want a clarification that if we do go over the edge of the financial cliff, is the council allowed to sell the bacon off?
Can you respond to that issue about Councillor Porter's fixation on bacon? Thank you.
Chair, over the years, on a number of occasions, I and others have looked at the prospect of actually selling some of the artefacts in the museums. And consistently we've had the advice that to do so, councils suffer more serious penalties by way of loss of support, particularly from Arts Council England, but from others as well, than they ever raise from it. And I would just challenge Nigel to give me an example of a single local authority of any political control in the country that is actually pursuing a policy of disposal of museum assets. I'd be very interested to see that example and to look at what penalties they have suffered and see whether they are somehow managing to make a profit on it, as it were. But all the advice that we've received is that the penalties outweigh the benefits. Yeah, I think that's perhaps all I need to say.
There's a reference to section 114 somewhere that may be arising in the next years as an issue. When do we get some notice of that might be really possible, rather than just a speculation?
I'll spare Amy's brushes. It is her legal responsibility. If she believes that we cannot meet our liabilities, she is required, as our finance officer, to issue us a notice. It's been variously described as councils going bankrupt. In fact, it's a notice that prevents councils from going bankrupt, because councils can't go bankrupt. What it does is to require the council, were we to be in a situation of being at risk of not being able to meet our liabilities, we would have to hold a meeting within 2 weeks to bring forward, and this is why I'm very, very anxious to avoid it, because you have to have a meeting within 2 weeks and take an axe to your services just there and then like that, right? And that is devastatingly destructive. You've got no time to plan for it. It just happens, and you stop spending on anything that is non-statutory. Now, obviously, there's a definition there, and non-statutory and non-contractually committed. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. So you've got to keep paying your contracts. You've got to keep paying your statutory stuff, but you just take an axe to everything else, and that obviously is devastating. Obviously, those services are very disruptive to the city. But that's what's happening in Nottingham and Birmingham. And I've been looking at some of the, the press coverage of what's happening there. It is appalling. I mean, it really is. Particularly, it's a sudden savagery of it, and that's what obviously we need to try and avoid. But our chief finance officer reassures us that we can make a budget for this year without the risk of needing to have a second 114 notice from her, but that we can't look to being able to do the same thing again next year, because by then our reserves are gone.
Well, members, thank you. This is a decision for full council, not for us. So let's just make that very clear. It's really important. But we are asked to note this report, and any comments that have been made will be forwarded up both by the commissions, because the commissions also look at this, and by the state. So can I ask for agreement that we note this report? Yep.
Could I ask you a question, Chair, if I may? Normally, in the past at full council, you used to get extensions for the budget. Obviously, this is a pretty crucial budget. I don't know whether this committee could recommend that we're allowed an extension. I mean, could it be put into the minutes that the committee would like? Because normally we only get a few minutes, like, was it 3 minutes to speak? And I think or 1 or 2 minutes. And in the past, there used to be an extension at budget, so...
City Mayor?
Chair, I'm not an expert, but I've been around a bit. I think the discretion to grant the extension is one that is given by the Lord Mayor in person, at the request of members. Am I right there?
Yeah, it's for Lord Mayor's decision, so requests would be submitted to the Lord Mayor, who would consider whether to grant those.
Okay, fine, that's absolutely fine. Thanks for the clarification. But could this committee just could we have it added that we would like? Does anybody want an extension of year? Or is it just me? I like to rattle on a bit.
How long do you want me to talk for?
I'd rather that we did not. I'd rather that we didn't get involved in advising the Lord Mayor.
Chair, if I may, I get exactly the same as everybody else, unless I ask for an extension. Half an hour? 2 hours? No.
15 minutes, or 10 or 15 minutes per member rather than 5 minutes.
Can I just clarify a recommendation? So,
Could it be a recommendation?
no, I just wanted to check that did the committee, in addition to notes, just want to recommend the point around scrutiny.
Yes.
Putting a separate recommendation about the scrutiny of the discretionary.
Oh yes, the scrutiny of the paragraph 20, 130.
Yeah.
Scrutiny of the work that's being undertaken, the reviews that are referred to in this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
We can just accept that that's discussed if you want to make a formal resolution.
Well,
I'm sure
I think
if you
everyone's
support
agreed to
it.
it. I think everyone's agreed to it.
We've all agreed.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
You don't need anything
I
more.
hope it will be minuted that there was an
Yes.
agreement that
Yeah.
scrutiny should be fully involved in the consideration of budgetary issues throughout the.
Yes.
On the speaking time issue, I mean, perhaps we could, I don't know, ask the Lord Mayor to consider enabling the leaders of the political groups to have more than 5 minutes or whatever.
Chair,
Yeah.
if I could just say, honestly, I just think that it's not appropriate for the committee to do it, but not necessary either, because it is my experience, and I say I've been around quite a number of years, that Lord Mayors generally say yes.
Yes.
And in fact, have never said no. I can't think of a single occasion when Lord Mayor has said no to an extension of time for the, for those who are speaking on behalf of the administration and opposition.
That's fine, yeah. It's up to the Lord Mayor. Okay, we're noting this report and we've asked specifically that details of the discretionary spend.
I don't think it's just discretionary. I think Francis understands. Yeah.
Yeah, the comments will be reflected in the.
Yeah, I think it's not discretionary. It's all the reviews that are being undertaken to look for savings in the services provided by the City Council.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Francis, have you got that?
It's perfectly reasonable.
Yes. And it will be in the minutes. So, is that agreed? Yeah? No nobody against? Right, we may need to move. Can we keep going? Do you want a break?
Yeah, keep going.
Keep going. Can we thank Amy and her team for the work on this? It's not a pleasant activity. It's not a pleasant activity at all.
We're only just starting, Chair. We've not quite finished yet. We've got a long agenda to come through.
Sorry?
We're not quite finished yet. I know she's, Amy and her team's worked really hard, but we're just on first item, we just filmed, so we're on item 2 now.
We've finished with the revenue budget, haven't we? Yeah, and that's what I was thanking Amy for and her team. If we now move to the draft capital programme, City Mayor.
I'll be fairly brief, Chair. This has also been in front of the various commissions. I've looked through the comments that were made. I don't think there were specific issues that we need to return to. I will just say, Chair, that it is, I think, undoubtedly going to be the case that some of the challenges for the revenue budget are going to be reflected in future years' capital budgets. Although we can't, without permission, do as some other authorities have got permission to do, and that is to move capital spend to revenue to bolster it in the short term, because you can only bolster it in the short term, because once it's spent, it's gone. You know, I think nonetheless, we will wish to be, I'm sure, to use what discussion we do have to use funding that is allocated for capital for revenue purposes. We wanted to do that in future years as part of any avoidance of Section 114 in future years. So it may be that there will be a real hit for the capital budget as well as the revenue budget in subsequent years.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you. On page 71, para 3.12. 71. 71. Para 3.12. Chair, there's some really good proposals here on B, D, E, F, G. Okay. Now, the money that's proposed to be spent on these items is really frontline services. Okay. And just want to know whether the amount is the same as last year, or has there been a cutback on this one, or is there any chance of increasing the amount? Because these are the things that people really want. So if we can increase it somewhere, and maybe we need some time to think about it, it would be really good help.
If I Councillor Stubb is entirely right again, Chair. These really are sort of the frontline stuff that people actually do see, in the wards and the neighbourhoods across the cities. And I think, and Amy will correct me, that the sums here are broadly similar to what's been delivered in previous years. I was told a moment or two ago about the pressure on the capital programme. I very much hope that whatever we do to the rest of the capital programme, these frontline things can be preserved in future years. I do know that certainly with some of them, like environmental works, even for prevention and stuff, there's quite a lot of work required to actually deliver these, and I'm very happy for perhaps scrutiny to consider whether they could be increased, whether there ever to be an increase in the capital programme in future. But a lot of it does come back to a very limited number of people, much reduced workforce of people now being expected to deliver them within the year. So I'll be reluctant just to say, oh yeah, throw another 100,000 of that one, because I'm not sure it would necessarily be capable of being spent.
Councillor Porter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Page 72, the item G, which is £0.2 million for front walls. Now, again, this sort of points to, I think, a lack of joined-up thinking again by the local authority, in that they want to spend £200,000 improving the walls to make an area, some entrances into the city to look more attractive, which people may think is a nice idea. But at the same time, we got the Highways Department wrecking the local environment in Ayleston, where they've stuck these concrete blocks at hundreds of thousands of pounds into the road, which everybody says look extremely ugly. But not only are they ugly, they're dangerous, and it's a main route into the city. So why should one area have money spent on it to make it look more attractive, while the council goes out and vandalises another part of the city? It's just bonkers, really is, at the end of the day. There was no consultation about these concrete blocks at all. But if anybody goes down there, go down yourself, Ted, you'll see the character of the area has been spoiled. If somebody had to stick in a planning application for this, you know, the council would refuse it. I mean, it's ridiculous. So it's about joined up thinking. You've got one part of the council wanting to improve things, which is good, and the other part of the council acting like vandals.
Is that a temporary arrangement on
No.
I hope so, yeah. I hope they're pulling out next week.
It's a very different issue about the front walls of housing.
Anyway, City Mayor.
It's funny, I absolutely had some really positive feedback about those works on no, actually, for people who actually live on the on that part of. Oh, Chair. Yeah, I've had some very positive feedback. I dare say that there are some people who are less enthusiastic about them. But I would just say about the front walls scheme. Some of us have been around, and I think Councillor Darby, Councillor Waddington, and I certainly have been around long enough to remember the renewal strategy, the housing renewal strategy. And we'll recall that as a part of that, very significant amount of work was done improving the front boundary walls on many of the streets in the city. That work was transformational. I mean, it really was. I'd just give you an example, a bit that people perhaps just take for granted. It's a bit I know, obviously, because I live on Evington Road. But you know the bit of Evington Road going up towards the park gates, just before you get up to the top there. There's walls sideways on. They were all put in as part of the renewal strategy. The back walls of St Albans Road were all put in as part of the renewal strategy. Now, you just take them for granted. But it totally and utterly transformed that area. It really did, which was incredibly, it was devastated by the, by the threats of the road scheme that was due to go through there. And what this scheme is doing is picking up a few of the bits that were missed out. And I think one of them that is being looked at is parts of Foss Road, where you really, can see that it hasn't, the whole environment in the area hasn't improved in the way that it has in many of these other areas. They're comparatively small sums of money, but they can, as I say, transform areas for not just the immediate prospect, but for decades to come. And as I say, you look at that piece at the top of Evington Road, and it's hard to believe now, but all of those backyards were open. All of those other areas were derelict in front of those houses, and now they look just neat and tidy.
Any other comments? Sorry, Councillor Darby.
On the point I raised earlier on about increasing the budgets, what I will do is I'll write to the officers and think it through where the money could be found to increase that capital. Yeah. Because you can't have the answers here, but I think further discussions will take place. So if you can find the money from somewhere, then let's have a go at it.
I'm happy to have a conversation with Councillor Darby about any ideas he's got about the generating more capital to support the capital programme.
Okay, that's another decision for the council. We're just noting a report on any comments to add to that. Housing revenue account, is that item 12 or item 12? Yeah, item 12, housing revenue account. Chris, straight to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief reminder as a starter that the housing revenue account budget relates to council tenants' rents and services, and the fund's ring-fenced for this purpose only, and it's a legal requirement that the budget for the HRA is a balanced budget. Now, what's in front of you today to consider is a balanced budget, but to do this we've had to request the highest level of rent increase because the housing revenue account continues to face significant pressures expected to be in the region of £10 million in 24-25. That's set out in more detail in 4.41 of your report, Table 1, page 100 of your pack. The 7.7% rent increase which is being proposed in this report equates to an average increase in rent of £6.58 a week, taking the average Leicester City Council rent to £85.48. And just a reminder that up to almost 60% of our tenants receive housing benefits or equivalent, so we'll have the increase covered. Alongside the rent increase, we're proposing a 7.7% rent increase on garage rents, a 6.7% increase on service charges, and a 5% increase on gypsy and traveller plot rent, and a 10.1% reduction on waylighting service charges is proposed due to the direct link to electricity cost reductions. For district heating, we've got 1,900 tenants and 1,000 homeowners are supplied with heating and hot water through the district heating scheme. The charges for properties with a heat meter are separated into fixed charges and a variable charge for the heat actually consumed. The forecast underlying cost of gas for 24-25 is significantly lower. This not only reduces the variable consumption charges, but also has enabled a partial reduction to the fixed costs. So the report therefore proposes for the coming year a fixed cost reduction of 24%, down from £375 to £284, and for the heat variable charge to reduce down by 29%, from 12.31 kilowatt hour to 8.7 pence kilowatt hour. For those properties with no heat meter installed, you'll see the report also puts a proposal in to reduce the average annual charge from 1,611 to 1,460, which equates to a 9.4% reduction in the charge. On the assumption of all the proposals in the report being taken forward, that would mean that from a capital perspective, out of the revenue budget in total, we're proposing to have a capital budget of £25.86 million. 15 million of that relates to additional investment into new build housing to bring on more council housing. So it would equate to a net budget of £10.8 million with, for core property improvements, with increases in budgets for kitchens and bathrooms, for boilers, for roofing and for soffits and fascias, and also an increase in the budget for the disabled adaptations for tenants. You can actually see the full table and breakdown of the proposed capital programme on page 110 of your pack. I'm pleased to be able to report back to the Commission that the budget has been put in front of the Tenants Forum members in December. Overall, all members fed back that they thought the Housing Revenue Account budget proposals was a good budget proposal. Tenants Forum members' main concern was about the 7.7% rent increase proposed, but ultimately they determined that based on the financial pressures and their design not to reduce the capital programme or services provided by the Housing Revenue Account, they would support all of the proposals. Appendix G from page 127 of your pack provides more detailed feedback from the forum. The proposal has also been considered by the Housing Scrutiny Commission in January, and comments from the Commission are in Appendix H from page 131 of your pack. From a timeline perspective, the intention is to take the report into full council on the 21st of February. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. I did find the appendix on your priorities very encouraging. It's great to see so much positive stuff being done, and it's also good to hear that the tenants organisation, I don't know if it's as active as it used to be, but it's good to see that they're taking a reasonable approach to these quite difficult issues. But other members, Councillor Porter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. Just a couple of questions, really. One was to do with on page 99, just a discrepancy at 3.1 between some rents that are going up by 7.7%, and then obviously you've got down here a 5% increase for hostel rent and service charges. So I just wanted some clarification about that, because I think at the previous meeting we were told that the council has this enhanced rough sleeper offer, and that what it was actually doing was, because the council was going over and beyond its statutory duties and providing accommodation to rough sleepers, which is, you know, something, obviously if somebody's homeless, we should be doing that, but going above and beyond what we're, you know, legally required to do. And the concern was it was attracting people from across the country to come and make themselves homeless in Leicester in order to get housed, which people will do, won't they? I mean, if the word gets round, you can come to Leicester and get a house, people are going to all get accommodation, people are bound to take it up. So my concern, really is tenants who are currently living in Leicester will say, well, my rent's going up by 7.7%, but people who could be coming from, I don't know, Liverpool, Scotland, Yorkshire or wherever, could be coming to Leicester and their rents are only going to be increasing by 5%. So it was just to try and find out why. Is it allowed to, are you allowed to have a, you know, basically discriminate against local residents?
Chris?
Thank you, Chair. So obviously the rent increase for the general housing stock is 7.7%, and the proposal you're referencing is the 5% increase in hostel rents. The hostel we have remaining is the Dawn Centre, and the Dawn Centre is for single people. The best practice, and what our accountants follow, is the line that the Dawn Centre pays, the rent has to pay for the service of the Dawn Centre. So in essence, each year what happens is there's a calculation done to determine how much money will be needed to run the Dawn Centre. And the 5% increase in hostel rents proposed covers that increase, what we're anticipating for 24-25. That's why it's considered as a separate entity to the general stock of our housing HRA. The other same applies really. From there's a 5% increase in the Gypsum Travellers rents, and that's the same principle in essence, that the costs of running the sites for those particular Gypsum Travellers is covered by the overall rents from those Gypsum Traveller sites, and the same process has been calculated out that we need a 5% increase to cover those additional costs in that particular area. I hope that explains.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, and good to see certain things, most of the things are very positive. Pleased to see that the district heating has been reduced, and I think that we've travelled together well, and we've reached that peak, and it's only the tenants that are going to benefit from that. But so I pick up what Councillor Porter said in terms of somebody from Liverpool or Scotland coming here. In terms of my experience of housing, I think they've got to have a local connection, so that will stop people coming, and I think that needs to be put to one side in terms of that. But one of the things is the right to buy. It's increased once again, and if it's on that trajectory, we have a shortage of housing stock, but it will also have an impact on our housing revenue account. Just wondering if it continues in that kind of trajectory, what kind of, and I don't want figures now, it's impossible, but what would be the potential impact on that? And secondly, we have, it's been mentioned that there's a recruitment issue in terms of under 4.47 of operatives, craft operatives, and we're going to recruit 10 more. But obviously, I'm not sure how many voids that we have. Obviously, void properties means less rent and less people being housed. But would this 10 additional apprenticeships, how much of that gap would be filled by those 10, or do we need? We haven't got an endless well of money, but what would be the perfect scenario in terms of getting the right operatives?
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, in 4.45, it does set out that we're anticipating losing another 275 properties as a result of the Right to Buy scheme. And that will impact the local authority losing rent of £1.2 million. So that sort of sets out the context of how big a challenge that is for the local authority, especially with the need for council housing to meet the demands of what we've kind of presented in relation to the homelessness pressures historically. And that continues to be a significant burden, with Leicester probably faring worse in relation to the level of losses that occur in Right to Buy than many other local authorities, which is obviously a major issue, because the more rent you lose in that regard, the less you have to spend on services for tenants and on the housing estates in order to maintain them. So it becomes more of a challenge. In relation to 4.47, it's an uplift in relation to the number of craft apprentices by 10. So we already have 30 craft apprentices active at any one time. We are due to go out this year. One of our cohorts has just finished, and the additional 10 will mean we can go out for 25 in total. So it will take our total apprenticeship up to 40. If finances would have allowed, we would have personally liked to have increased that further. So it's probable, if I'm sat here next year, I will be asking for a further uplift for further apprenticeships, because actually growing your own and training your own staff in relation to them doing the direct job you need them to do is far preferable in relation to our desire to bring people on and develop them through the business and be able to see them grow. So, but as I've said at the beginning, you have to cut your cloth accordingly, and there's a budget that has to be balanced, so there's only so much growth we can actually fit in this year. Some of that growth has gone towards that, some of the other growth has gone towards capital improvement and making sure we're investing in our housing stock.
I was just thinking about the correlation between craft operatives and void properties. So if you reach that kind of maximum scale of craft operatives, then we could get rid of the voids, because I'm not sure how many voids we have at this moment in time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sorry, I should have reassured you that actually from a base staffing perspective, last year we presented historically at scrutiny and other meetings that we were suffering with recruitment in relation to craft operatives. Our worst position was we were actually 50 craft operatives short, and we continue to recruit, we continue to try ways to attract people. What I can positively report now is that actually that vacancy level has dropped to below 10, and we're actively recruiting on a permanent basis all the time now, and we continue to bring people in. So, and in correlation to the voids and the performance, I've reported again historically here that we're probably at the lowest level we've probably been running at for many years. We're actually well below 400. We're below 2% of our total housing stock. So we're roughly, I don't know the exact figure, but somewhere in the region of about 375 void properties, which is extremely low. That increase and bringing those craft staff back on board has enabled us to achieve that reduction in void properties.
Thank you.
Councillor Porter.
Yeah, just one final last quick question. At our last meeting, we were told that the decision to send a report to full council on the rough sleepers had been withdrawn, but we've never been given an explanation why that was withdrawn. Can you explain why it was withdrawn?
Chris. Or City Mayor, sorry.
It wasn't on rough sleepers. It was on homelessness much more generally, wasn't it, Chris? Yes. Yeah. I think you may have got a bit confused about what the report was about. It wasn't about rough sleeping. It was about homelessness.
No, it says in the minutes from the previous meeting. Let's get this right. Yeah, if you go to page 14 you turn to page 14 of the actual report that we've got in front of us. It says here on page 14, probably mid-paragraph, the current enhanced rough sleeper offer was beyond what the City Council was legally obliged to provide, etc., etc. It was stressed that the revised report did not seek a decision from full council in respect of the enhanced rough sleeper provision, but this matter would be kept under review. So the question was, why was it withdrawn?
It's being kept under review.
Yeah, but why? Why are you reviewing it? Why aren't you going forward with it? It was withdrawn from the full council. Why?
Right. I think
You must have made a decision. Somebody must have said, let's not go forward with it. So I just want to know why. Chris? Chris seems keen to answer.
Well, all right, Chris can answer, I'm sure.
All I was going to say, Sir Peter, is I thought you'd answered the question earlier where you'd actually confirmed that the intention was to take it forward, and probably you were trying to take it forward into the February council meeting, but if not, you'd take it forward into the March council meeting.
I recall, Chair, I think Nigel may not be talking about the capital proposals for dealing with homelessness now, but the revised offer, which was about reducing the current level of support to rough sleepers, so that only 15%, as I recall from that paper we discussed, would be supported directly with housing, with a temporary accommodation. But at the last meeting of this commission, I raised that and I asked if that could be not gone forward with until further reviews have been undertaken, including equality impact assessment. That was agreed. That was agreed here in this meeting. So I'm assuming that that is still the process. You know, that's still what we're working to. Yeah.
I mean, frankly, Chair, we're doing what we were asked to do.
It's just so for my benefit, because obviously I didn't pick up on this. Sue said that the proposal was withdrawn because the council was initially planning to reduce it by 15%, and more than 15%. Oh, right. So the council were planning to reduce the current offer, and Sue quite rightly picked up and said, hang on a minute, this doesn't sound very good. Let's have a review before we make the decision. Is that correct? Thank you.
Well, Chair, with respect, that sounds like good scrutiny, and the executive function actually taking note of what is being asked of it. I'm not quite sure what Nigel's
no, it's absolutely fine. I've got clarification. For some, maybe I was asleep during that particular part, but no, that sounds excellent. So the review is going on at the moment, and it'll probably go to the March council meeting. Is that what you're saying?
No, that is again confusing the two issues. What I was talking about earlier on is the capital proposals with regard to the spending on providing additional accommodation. This is about the policy issue as to the level of provision that is given to those who are in need out there on the street.
Okay. Well, again, this decision about housing revenue account goes to full council. We're just asked to note it. Is that agreed? Sorry, formally I should be asking. Would you second that? Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, we move, and thank you, Chris, for that, and Councillor Kelvin, not here, but for that report. Treasury Management Strategy, page 171 of our papers. Amy.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask you a question? Would it be okay if I take the three items together? Because they flow together and it's really hard to describe them as three separate items. Would that be okay with you, Chair?
Yes, sorry.
Is that okay? It's just they sort of all fit together, so it's easier to explain them. And I'm actually going to start with the last one, if that's okay, because that's the Treasury Management Policy. And that is basically the framework and the governance that sits around the Council's borrowing and investments. It defines the overall objectives of our Treasury Management, and that is about our emphasis on optimum performance, but also effective control of risk. And that sets out our policies. Now, that doesn't come to committee every year. We take it to council probably once every about 3 years, because we don't change it very often, and we haven't changed it this time. It's just been some very minor amendments to wording in there. And that sits as the underline for all of the other policies that are strategies that are then in front of you. The Treasury Management Strategy is the next one, and this is the strategy around managing the council's borrowing and cash balances during the year. We hold cash balances for our day-to-day spend. They all sat there, so we will receive income ahead of our spend. So we need to manage that cash and make sure we effectively get the right returns, but also manage the risk around them. It also covers off the debt we've incurred for capital expenditure. The policy details the level of borrowing we've currently got, but also notes that as we spend our cash balances, as our reserves go down, it is likely we are to require to undertake borrowing over either by the end of next financial year or going into the following. This is on decisions that we've made previously around our capital expenditure. In there, it details our treasury limits, which are around the borrowing that we are going to take. And then at the back, there is the principles of the limits we have on individual types of investment, and that's in the appendix at the back of that report. We then have our investment strategy, again another annual strategy that we are required to take to council for approval. This sets out the council's approach to making and holding investments other than those covered in the Treasury strategy. Again, this is an annual one. We are required by government to bring forward an investment strategy annually. And this is mainly around the concerns government have around local authorities that have undertaken significant borrowing. For the purpose of this strategy, the investment means any spending on interest-bearing loans to third parties. And we have detailed them in this report, the ones we've currently got. Otherwise, Chair, I was going to keep it quite brief and let members ask questions if that is okay, Chair.
Councillor Forson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I must say I'm not entirely happy that it's all being merged into one, because I think, certainly from my point of view, I think I've often raised concerns about the investment strategy, and I think I've been proved to a certain extent wise to warn the council about some of their plans, and has been highlighted obviously by this Lothbury Property Trust, which, for your information, I don't know if other people are aware, is actually an off-seas investment trust, and it isn't regulated by the UK Financial Conduct Authority. It's regulated by the government or the Conduct Authority in Ireland. But it just seems a bit strange that a local authority would want to be involved in an offshore investment trust rather than investing in something in the UK. I don't think the council would be benefiting from any tax advantages by being in an offshore trust rather than something that's based in the UK. So I don't think the council has to pay tax if we made any profits on it. But what does concern me is obviously by having it all piled together, we're not able to scrutinise it in particular details. And I do remember the first time that the Lothbury Trust or whatever other property trust came to the full council, we were told that the council was going to do it because we could get an 8% or so return on it, and you would only be getting 0.5% if it was in a bank. But there's no point in getting an 8% or whatever return if you lose all your money. And it looks like this property trust may go under. Certainly the value of it has plummeted. You can't take anything out of it. It's closed. And the other thing that concerns me as well is, in part of the council's investment strategy, if you remember, we lent at 5% £600,000 to the Haymarket Consortium. Now that sounds, oh yeah, it's a great return, isn't it? 5% at £600,000, but we lost the lot again. You know, really, I think these sorts of issues can't be skirted over, and I think it's important that we look at it. So I'll take it that we're doing it this way round here at this meeting, but hopefully at the full council it won't all be merged into one.
Well, I think
we need to take these reports one at a time, quite clearly. They're presented in three, but the first one is the Treasury Management Strategy. So we're asked to note this report, and we get another report in 12 months' time. Are there any points about that paper that people... Councillor Waddington.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit I find it very complex, and so I suppose my first question is, do we have some sort of expert financial advisor that has the relevant experience and track record to assist the council in making decisions about where to invest and, you know, how to do it? Because I can't claim to be an expert myself, otherwise I'd be a millionaire, wouldn't I? But looking at particular aspects of it, I'll just have to pull out a few little things I've spotted, which will not in any way deal with the whole context of the thing. There's reference on page 173, paragraph 4.2, to Barclays Bank, and the council has, as far as I can see, repaid a loan, but had a premium cost of £2.2 million. That might have been quite appropriate, but I'm not very clear of the sort of reasons for that, rather than allowing it to run to its full term, or indeed why it was taken out with Barclays Bank in the first place. I mean, Amy may not know the reason why Barclays Bank were used either, but I'm just asking about it. And then I saw some reference to maybe on another paper. Oh yes, page 176. We will invest up to £30 million in commercial property funds. So why? What are we? We currently have investments of £7 million. So why are we going to invest up to £30 million? I mean, does that mean 30 million, or it says the performance has been disappointing? So that the capital losses have been outweighed by the income received to date. So that then goes on to speak about Loughbury, as Nigel has raised. So, and then on page 179, sorry about this. It's just I did read this one. Yeah. Well, I try to. Some of them I don't understand. In this paragraph 8.4. Can you just explain what that is about? We would prioritise in 24-25 having enough cash to repay the £20 million Lobo loans to avoid paying higher interest rates until 2054 on these loans. Would that mean we'd have to pay another redemption fee, you know, for early repayment, or not? Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay. Luckily, we don't have to decide on all these things.
No, but I can ask the questions. Yeah.
Good question. The chair would rather you ask the questions here than me at the council.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So yes, we do. We have an expertise in our team. We have especially staff that are trained in treasury and manage our treasury, and they are very well trained and know their areas. But also, on top of that, the council employees are in close, and they're our treasury advisors, and they support a lot of local authorities. They provide us with credit information around investments, and actually their information is what then sits with the limits behind here. So they'll tell us that they think we should do a maximum £10 million with a bank, an unsecured or secured, and the length of time, and we use that to then inform our treasury strategy. In relation to the Barclays Bank and the premium, what happens when you pay the loans back? Sometimes we get break clauses, or there's a reason like the interest rates come up, and actually the bank wants that loan repaid, would like to offer us the opportunity to repay the loan. And this is the case. Barclays came to us and said, look, we are happy to had discussions about negotiating a repayment on that loan. And what they charged us was the repayment, the principal that we originally borrowed, and then 2.2 million premium. What we then do is look at how much that loan would have cost us if we'd kept it. So, I don't know, I'm just going to do really simple maths here. If it was going to cost us 5 million over 10 years, we're allowed to then spend that 2.2. And actually, on our revenue budget, the difference between those two over the 10 years, we would have made a revenue savings on that difference. The difference between paying £5 million worth of interest over the 10 years and the £2.2 million of interest. And that's a conversation, we would always look at our loans in that way. Why Barclays Bank was taking that loan through them, I do not know. I wasn't here at the time. I imagine at the time there was some benefit analysis or some work done around whether it was better to borrow from BWLB or you have a commercial loan at that time. With the LOBO, it's a very similar principle. If we get an opportunity, because the rates are right for the bank and they offer that opportunity for us to come out of that LOBO, we will look at how much the premium is, how much interest we're going to pay over the rest of that loan, and whether it's financially beneficial for us to repay that loan, because we might be able to get better rates at PWLB, or we might not actually need those cash balances at the time. What I could do as well, because I do understand it's really complex areas, I will follow this up with a note, just so it's hopefully very clear for everybody what we consider when we're doing this. In the £30 million, that is a limit. So we would, there's lots of limits in here, and we will always make it, when we're looking at investments, whether that's the right decision at that point. So these are the maximum limits that we could invest in there, which is not saying, and I probably just need to adjust that word a little bit, it's not saying we will borrow 30 million, we can borrow up to 30 million. And I think that word in Councillor Wellington probably just needs a little bit of clarification, and I will make that clearer for the final report for Council. I think that's answered all your questions, but please, if you'd like them.
I suppose my concern is, I mean, I understand the logic of what's been said, but my concern is, obviously, that when we repay these loans early, and we have to then pay an increased charge, you know, a redemption, you know, early release charge, that's coming out of the revenue budget. We've just heard how difficult the revenue budget situation is. So one has to weigh up the, you know, cost benefit of all this. Sorry, is that wrong? Is that wrong then, what I've just said?
So, if we pay the only say that we talk about this 2.2 million, when we repaid that in April, we don't pay that in the revenue budget in the year that if we paid it physically in cash. We pay it over the same lifespan of the loan in the first place. So actually what we've done is save every year, it would be about 250,000 over that time. I hope that's... So it's actually saving. Yeah, it's a budget saving.
Thank you. That wasn't clear. No.
I think it's Councillor Darby next. Did you have a question?
No, Councillor Darby. I didn't have a question.
No, Councillor Darby. No, you didn't. Hold on. It's over to Councillor Ford.
Sorry, yeah, I'll be quick. It was just as a result of Sue's question, which was an excellent question. It was about, the 30 that you'd mentioned about here, the investment in commercial property, 30 million. And you said, maybe it was a slip, you said to borrow 30. The council wouldn't be borrowing money to then invest, would they?
Sorry, no, we can't do that. So
no.
If I did say borrow, I definitely meant invest.
Right, okay. So the £30 million, obviously, if the council's on the edge of a financial cliff, where's this £30 million coming from? Why? What's the point? I mean, people looking at it from the outside will say, well, if you've got £30 million in your bank or wherever it happens to be, under your carpet, under your bed, and you're slashing my community centre services or my, care at home or wherever else, why are you putting 30 million quid into investing into speculative property fund? Why aren't you providing your statutory services with that money?
Thank you, Chair. This is the management of our cash balances, so this is not taken away from what's already in the budget report. I think if you look at paragraph 2.3, it talks about this is our cash and how we manage our cash balances. This is the need to do our day-to-day expenditure is separate from this. So only the reason we have cash balances is the only way it follows the budget is in the sense of the level of earmark reserves we are holding. So this is not taken away from the budget position. This is not us investing money does not mean that it's then not available to balance the budget. It's just us ensuring that we are investing the money to get a return when we're holding the balances, cash balances.
I hear what you're saying, but if you go off and spend £30 million buying shares in some property company, you haven't then got that £30 million to spend. This is what the point I'm making. Why aren't you keeping hold of the £30 million, spending it on statutory services rather than speculating?
We would only invest in the property fund if we thought we had £30 million available long term to manage that in our cash balances. This is a limit up to. We are not proposing at the moment we will go out and invest £30 million.
Yeah, but we haven't got £30 million available because we've already been told tonight we're on the edge of a financial cliff. You know, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And why are we paying back £20 million to Barclays? I mean, the fact we must have had £20 million to pay them back. You can't say, if I was getting repossessed in my home and I've got this sort of cash, you know, in the bank, I wouldn't need to get repossessed.
I think what we have to remember, managing our cash balances is different to the cost of our day-to-day running. We will often receive cash ahead of us spending it, so we do need to have a treasury function. And as this notes, at some point we will need to borrow again. But actually, these two loans that we've talked about, the interest rates are higher than what we can borrow at currently. So actually, we are saving money in the revenue budget, repaying these loans early. And if we do need to borrow, we can borrow at a cheaper rate than what they were currently borrowed at. And that would help the revenue budget.
Yes, my reaction to this is that we might value a training session on all this at some stage. Because we're not financial people directly. We have very good advisors, so it's not just Amy and her team. It's a whole group of people behind advising. So I think it might be useful not to deal with this paper now, but in the future, if people are interested, to have some sort of training session on this high finance. Yeah. So.
Chair, that's not a problem. I can arrange that, and actually, I'll probably arrange our Arling Close to come and deliver that training as well. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit like apples and pears. You know, what are you discussing, apples or pears or both, in that discussion. That's not a criticism, by the way. It's just how it feels. So we're asked to note that paper and pass any comments which we have. I think we can leave it at that, yeah? The next one is where Sue, I think some of you were wanting to talk about the investment strategy, which is page 197 onwards, the investment strategy. That's the next paper.
Could we organise some training, say, online before the full council? Because I think it's something that needs to be clarified, because people will be saying, if the council's got these millions to invest in projects.
Yes, I think it's a good question, but I think we're talking about difference between apples and pears or something, whatever the saying is. Different things happening there. So if you're saying that you're going to ask that question at council...
No, I said before council. I would like an explanation, because, I mean, none of us are financial whiz kids, because if we were, we certainly wouldn't be here. We'll be on a beach somewhere, as I've said before, supping pina coladas.
And looking at our bacon.
Yeah, viewing our bacon, yeah.
You'd be buying it.
So I'm just thinking, let's get this sorted out sooner rather than later.
Amy.
Can I suggest that if Councillor Porter wants to have a session, we could do a session on Treasury strategies and his questions that he's raised tonight. Would that be okay?
But we all need training, don't we? We all need to understand it. Not just Councillor Porter.
Do you understand the questions?
Yes. Yeah. Well, if the members feel it would be helpful before council, we can arrange a session to vote on these reports.
we would like some explanation of what the difference is between these two funds, perhaps.
I think some of us will have different values.
If I may, Chair, so what's been said is basically, we're saying we're going to be hitting section 114, but because we have no money, and we blame the central government gave us all this cost, but we have money put aside, right, to invest into other things, but why don't we use some of that money to protect our frontline services? Is that what you're trying to say?
Rather than speculating and losing it all. Losing it all like we will do with the Loughborough Fund.
I think you're asking, is it possible to spend the sort of money you want to invest in on day-to-day services? Is that possible? And if it is, there's political decisions behind that, presumably, choices. Yeah. So maybe we can't answer that here and now, but you're worried about this.
If the council's on the edge of this financial cliff, we should all be very concerned.
I'm obviously not explaining it very well, so I'm going to try it another way. This is completely separate from our budget. So us placing an investment with someone is not us stopping us spending it on revenue money. It's just us making sure that when we're sat on cash balances, we're getting a return for that investment rather than it just sitting in a bank account where it gets no return. So it's not stopping us spending it on services. It is just about us managing our cash balances so we do get a return on them.
So it's a bit like a reserve, that?
It will... No.
Can I just say, no, I can't accept that, because what I would say is, if we've put £30 million into a property fund, we do not have that £30 million to spend on day-to-day services. It's as simple as that. If you go and buy shares in a property fund, you've then given your money and exchanged your money for shares in that property fund. You can't then go out and spend another £30 million, because you've already spent it by buying shares in the property fund.
Councillor Darwood.
I'm trying to understand this. Are we saying, in simple terms, this is instead of hiding our money beneath our beds? So what we're doing is putting our bank account, we're getting interest we can use. Okay.
Chair, it is worth remembering that for all the difficulty we have in actually spending on services, our income comes in irregularly. Doesn't all come in, nice neat parcels throughout the year as we need it. It comes in irregularly, particularly when we build things annually. And as a result of that, we have balances at particular times of the year, and indeed have had, until this coming year, sufficient reserves to cushion the reduction in that income. We have some experts who manage that in a very effective way. Rather than just putting it under the mattress, they actually put it somewhere where it produces some income, and that income helps to meet the bills quite substantially. I think it is interesting that obviously, despite some members having been around for quite a long time, they haven't got it yet. It's interesting, but I'm not, unduly surprised by that, because actually it happens away there in the background. But it's a very legitimate question to have it, more fully explained than I can do this evening, and Amy, even with all of her expertise, can do in the short time available. I don't know, Amy. I just through you, Chair, whether it is possible to offer something to members in advance of the budget meeting, because frankly, and I joked about this earlier on, but I'd much rather that they asked you the questions and got the experts to answer them than ask me the questions and expected me to be able to in the council chamber.
Chair, I must come back on this, because I completely understand what Peter's saying about the day-to-day money coming into the council. You have money flowing in, money flowing out. But the specific point I was making was the fact that Sue pointed out, which was the £30 million to go into a property fund. Now, Peter, you cannot say that that money would then be available day to day, because once it's gone into the property fund, you've bought shares in the property fund, you have spent the money. It isn't available. You may get the return of 5, 10% or whatever else. But the fact is that £30 million isn't available. You explain to me how you can buy shares, £30 million worth of shares, in a property fund and then still have the money in your bank account to use day to day. Explain that, Sir Peter.
Fortunately, Chair, I don't. Some experts do. And I really would suggest that if it can be set up before the council meeting, it's very helpful to do that, so that members can have an opportunity to hear direct from Amy and her team of experts how they manage this stuff day to day.
Can you explain then, Amy, how you can do that? Because I can't know. Let's have it done now, because there is no way you can spend £30 million buying shares and then have that money available day to day. You can't. It'd be like you going out and spending 30 million quid on a yacht, Ted, and then saying I've still got 30 million quid to spend buying, your pina coladas or whatever else.
But if I invested £30 million in property, which is going to give me over long term benefits that I can put back into the city, it would be very good.
Yeah, that's it. If it doesn't go bust like Lothbury and you lose a lot.
Anyway, I don't know if Councillor Tardy wants to.
Chair, can I just suggest, because it's a very complicated subject, and we could be here all evening, and the questions that you make are very valid, Councillor Porter. Maybe a session would be better, because once you start asking questions, we'll also start asking questions. I think this is a session that's needed separately to the meeting. That would be better. Thanks.
Would be, yeah.
So what we're proposing, if that's okay, is that we have some immediate response to, if that's possible, on the difference between spending 30 million on housing, on property, and spending it on services. Why would you do one and not the other? Yeah?
I think we need to be clear that investments aren't spending. They are us putting our money. If you sat in your current account, I don't know, and you had £2,000 in your current account, you might choose to put it in a savings account for a while, so that you get extra interest on it, because you wouldn't get it in your current account. That is what we are doing with these funds. With the relation to the property fund, I have just said it is a bit poorly worded, and I'm going to correct that. It is a limit. We are not saying that we are going to do it. We would only do it if it was right for us and our cash balances. At the moment, I would strongly suggest that I wouldn't be suggesting that we invest it in property funds. So I think we need to tighten that wording up a little bit on that paragraph. I think that's a very good point that Councillor Waddington picked up earlier, that actually that is not very clear, and I really want that to be clearer.
Sorry to just finish this off. The point I'm making is, I agree. If you've got £2,000 in your current account and you move it into your savings account, the money's still there. But you're talking about buying shares in a property fund, whether it's 2 million or 30 million. Doesn't make any difference. Once you've bought those shares, that money is not available to you. That's the point I'm making.
We're not proposing that we're going to put any money in a property fund currently. This is a limit. It's the maximum we will go to. We will always make a decision based on what we've got available and what our cash forecast is doing. We are not actually going to be taking out a £30 million property fund at the moment.
But you accept what I'm saying, Amy, that if you spend the money buying shares in the property fund, that money is not available day to day. Yeah? Am I right?
We're going around in circles. We are.
The point is that you're making a comparison between having your money in an interest-bearing account where you can withdraw it and spend it. So if you're going to invest in a property fund, you're buying shares in that property fund, that money is no longer available to you. And if the council thinks it is, then that's probably why we're on the edge of a financial cliff.
Well, in simple terms, you either invest so that you've got and keep that money in investment so you get some return which you can use for the services you want to provide, or you get rid of all your investments, put it on services that year, and then what do you do? It's false economy. But
I think we have to move forward. Is there any way that we can explain this more simply? Not now,
As of Chair, as I've offered, I will arrange a training session before Council to make sure that hopefully everyone's more comfortable.
It's actually quite a simple question, isn't it? Should you be putting money in investments or spending it and then it's gone?
Or is it actually a matter of choice, or a matter of actually doing the wise thing, making sure that you get as much as you can from that money while you're holding it?
What we've got today is there are controls on that investment, so that officers in the executive can't just do it in any random way, mavericks. There are controls which we feel are very important to make that sensible. Simple. So, we've asked to note this, put comments, which are many, to the Director of Finance, and we're asking for further clarity on that. So thank you, Councillor Porter.
Thank you, President.
So is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And then the third paper is Treasury Policy 24 to 25. Anything more to say on that? So that's basically the framework for borrowing and investments, yeah? And we're asked to note that as well, yeah? Thank you. But I think we need to think about how we inform members, particularly of this committee, about some of these financial arrangements, yeah? So that we know what, when we get a paper, we've got some idea. We're not going to be experts, and we shouldn't be. But we need to better understand some of the issues. Okay, thank you very much. We then move to our work programme. Oh, thank you, Amy, by the way. Overdue Select Committee work programme. If you've got any more suggestions about what we should be doing, then I suggest you go through your commissions, really, because that's a good place to start. No any other urgent business? So, thank you very much. It is, whatever time it is?
7:53.
7:53. 7:53. Thank you for your patience.